Gathering in All Out War is, at its core, a very simplistic concept, but there are little elements to it which have been added this season and just generally aren't that known. So, just generally, the resources listed up here are what you have in your home base's warehouse, in your main hub, and these materials will be required for various things within All Out War. So wheat will be primarily what's used for healing and also deploying from barracks, whereas brass, silver, and obsidian will be what is used in vehicle production and also constructing upgrades on buildings or building fortresses on villages. And going into this season, we have actually seen a massive increase in the resource costs of all these vehicles. This may be subject to change in future, but silver in particular is hugely demanded for making the likes of medic vehicles and the chariots that are required to rally players together. And these have been increased so significantly compared to the first season of All Out War, to the point where I do think personally they needed to be toned down in cost, but currently this is what they are. And of course, without the likes of these rally vehicles or without medic vehicles, you just can't PvP properly in this game mode whatsoever. You need healers restoring your health, restoring your resilience. You need people controlling 20, 30 people and controlling rallies correctly, both to just manipulate the pincer attack mechanics, but also the likes of just controlling players who can't make a certain time. So building up your economy as a faction in All Out War is hugely important to your success, actually, and you will need people gathering throughout. With wheat as well, you of course need huge amounts of excess for that to sustain healing. You can put it in municipal centers or warehouses so people can heal from their municipal centers when your buildings are being sieged. Your healers are going to need it to heal resilience and players' health. You're going to need it in your barracks or your military cities with barracks to be able to deploy from them. And transporting has a very significant part in this to play because of that also. So in terms of where you find resources, wheat will be 4 nodes here, just to the southwest corner of your main city. There'll be 4 nodes here with 100 slots each, and you'll pretty much never be able to over-exceed this cap, considering how many players will typically be in a faction. Then when it comes to the other nodes, you have medium industrial cities, small industrial cities, and large industrial cities. Every faction will by default spawn in their protected area with 1 small industrial city and 1 medium industrial city. Then when you venture out into the more open parts of the map, when they're unlocked through world progression, you'll be able to eventually get to the large industrial cities out here. And again, all of these, they're nodes. When you click on the building and you center in on the municipal center, you'll just go southwest to the outside, and each of these industrial cities will have 1 brass mine, 1 silver mine, and 1 obsidian mine. As you go up from small to medium to large, the mine capacity as well as the gathering efficiency will actually increase on all of these. So if you do gather on the large industrial city ones here, for example, note there 504,000 obsidian per hour. If we go to the small industrial city, for example, as a comparison, you'll note here it's only 288 gathering efficiency per hour. And over at the medium, it will be 360. So gathering at the higher levels of industrial city will yield more resources. It will just potentially be more risky, particularly when you start getting to the large industrial cities, because of course anyone can roam over here and kill you as your troops are either coming to these nodes or moving away from these nodes. Also, if you automatically place those resources in this warehouse, players with special bow units will be able to shoot over this wall and kill you if you just AFK there, which is another thing to note. But that is how you get resources and why you'll need them. To actually start gathering resources, this is where gathering vehicles will actually come into play. You can only gather if you have gathering vehicles equipped to your marches. So here, for example, I have 2 marches deployed here. My second march has no vehicle at all, and my first only has a rally vehicle on them right now. So if I click the second march with no vehicle equipped and then click on a node, it will say the corresponding vehicle is not deployed, no matter what type of vehicle or what type of node I click on, even if it's a wheat node. So we're going to have to deploy a march with a gathering vehicle, and you'll note here that there are differing rarities of them. So you'll by default spawn into the map with 3 small resource wagons, which will allow you to gather on wheat and brass. If when you get silver ones, that will allow you to gather on both of them, but silver too. And then as you go up to gold, you'll also be able to gather on obsidian. As you go up in these rarities too, you'll also see that the gathering speed will increase up here. So there is value in getting higher rarity gathering vehicles, even if you're, say, using the large ones to gather silver because of its increased demand in this season of All Out War. You will be gathering that silver faster because it gains this 25% gathering speed increase when you send troops to gather with it equipped. So you're going to have to deploy your march with that equipped. You don't have to do anything like click special troops or logistics. You just need that equipped, and then you can deploy it. And then with that equipped, we'll now obviously not get that error message when we right click a node, and we'll be able to send to it just fine. And since I have a gold vehicle equipped, I can send to whatever node I want on the map. Now, sending to nodes seems quite simple when you do it like that, but then the question becomes sending to nodes and getting the resources to where you want them. Because, for example, with vehicle building, only the resources in this warehouse can actually be used for vehicle building in any way. So you see here these numbers here. These are what are listed up top. These numbers are only what is in your home base warehouse. But then if I click city info and look at other cities, you'll see we have 160 mil wheat in this military city. We have wheat in this resources city. We have obsidian in this industrial. And all of this will, if it's going to be used, have to be transported back to our home base. Typically, you will want your wheat away from your home base somewhere close to the fighting, so healers can get it. You can deploy from it from barracks and military cities. But all the brass, all the silver, all the obsidian, you'll want to come back to your home base so it can be used for vehicle building typically. So when you're sending to nodes, you can send to it like I've just sent now, where you just right click it and you'll go into the node and you'll start gathering. Then you can click this troop list or the R hotkey and see how much you're gathering and for how long. And eventually, when this is done, your troops will, without any other inputs, automatically walk to the nearest warehouse and automatically deposit the resources that they gather into their troop capacity here. The issue there is, of course, like I've said, we don't actually want the resources that are being gathered here to go into this warehouse. We want them to be in the warehouse back here at base. So in this season of All of War, there's been a few buggy mechanics and issues with some of these things throughout, but since this is a guide and hopefully it should be relevant for the next season of All Out War and any more in the future, I will just cover the ways you can ideally minimize this issue either way. If we move the troops back out, another way we can deploy to a mine will be if we click on it, you'll see these options down here. We can share it, we can look at the troop list like I've shown before, we can see the information here, but then there's also the A and E hotkeys. So A is only accessible to officials, which is why I'm using this account here, if anyone's wondering, rather than my own, because it's an official and I'm not, and there's only 3 officials allowed per alliance. So if I click A on there, you should be able to, as an official, set a default return point for all gatherers in there when they eventually hit their carrying capacity. This specifically, I believe, hasn't worked all event, and it will by default just be selected on the nearest warehouse. So officials will manually have to go in and click onto their home base to have gatherers automatically walk back to base. Like I said, there has been issues with this throughout the event, but in future it should hopefully work, and there's no negative to ticking it for officials either way, just in the rare case that it does work. The one way that everyone has control over, however, is this E option. So if we click E, or if I just click the hotkey here for simplicity, you'll have a screen pop up similar to that when you're, say, helping build vehicles back in base. And this screen here will allow you to select, when sending your troops to a mine, where they will take the resources when they're done. So you can set gathering troops to go to a selected city to store resources in the warehouse after they finish gathering resources. So if I click on my march here and go through this drop list and click on, say, small industrial city 10, it will then change to that, and it will automatically go to the small industrial city 10 when I click gathering resources as soon as this march fully fills up its gathering capacity down here. Obviously, as I've said, we're going to want these resources in our home base. So we're going to want to have Fortress of Frost here in my situation. Selected, click the march, click gathering resources. And then hopefully, if all goes to plan, if there are no issues, this march will automatically walk from this brass mine all the way down and back into base. So the resources can actually be used with vehicle production rather than just be sitting in a warehouse elsewhere, not getting any use. That is the ideal, but as, I guess you can't see them right here, but as markers that I have placed throughout this event would suggest, particularly when there are issues of mechanics not working, you will have to perhaps manually transport resources like this back to base, and even if mechanics are working properly, you'll need to do this with wheat to get it out to your military cities, to get it out to your cities near fighting. So here, for example, we have hundreds of millions of wheat in our home base. That isn't going to help us in, say, if we're trying to help these fights over here, since it's like a 20-minute march from here all the way over there. So we're going to have to move all that wheat over here. We can move it into this military city and then deploy from the barracks, which will cost wheat. We can also potentially, if, say, this is the fight we're trying to focus right now, move it to, say, this warehouse. So healers can come back and pick it up to heal with, so people can move their marches into the municipal center and heal themselves also. So transporting is also a core part of gathering, which isn't touched on as much as it probably should be. There are two primary ways of transporting at this point. One is just doing it manually. So when you click the adjust supplies button down here, the X hotkey with a march, that will load up this screen, and it will automatically have quite a weird screen here which comes up. So what's happened here is it's effectively automatically deposited your resources into the warehouse, but then also pick them up. So you're just carrying them in this screen. They're not deposited at all. And if you want to deposit them, you're going to have to click this quick unload button, and it will automatically deposit everything you have in there. And then you can click confirm, and everything you are carrying will then be removed off this march and put into that warehouse. You can, of course, then also use these sliders to pick up specific resources and then move them around and do whatever you want with them. But if you're actually transporting and that's your specific goal, the best way to do that now will actually be this transport button up here in the top right. And when you click this screen will come up, and you can see here only up to 20 million supplies can be selected at one time, and this can be done once per march. So one account can have 60 million here selected and moving at any given time. And what you can actually do here is say select all your brass in here, then click Fortress of Frost as your target city, and then click confirm, and your march will automatically pick up their maximum carrying capacity, walk it all the way back to your target city, deposit it into the warehouse automatically, and then walk back and repeat the process over and over and over again until all of the resources that you selected are fully moved. So you might have to be careful with this, obviously, if you're moving, say, wheat to buildings all the way out here or something, but this will by far and away be the most convenient and easiest way to transport resources now. It's much easier than doing it manually, obviously, because you can just click it on all three marches and then just go AFK for like 20 minutes and it'll be done sooner than you know it. One other thing that influences gathering, which can cause some confusing, is the effects of gathering speed and gathering capacity. So gathering speed stats have no effect at all, actually, in All Out War, but gathering capacity does. So gathering capacity does influence the amount of resources that your troops can carry at any given time. I can probably quickly show this if I just quickly change talents. So here on my Lord March, for example, the capacity is 3 million approximately. If I find myself here and change my talents quickly, just like so, my talents have now been swapped into gathering, so it will show the old talents down here until you refresh it. And then if we refresh, okay, it doesn't want to load. If I go in and out of the event, it should load then. Yeah, we're back in, and you see 4 million and 610,000 here as the carrying capacity. So gathering capacity talents will affect how much you can actually gather to, but also this will affect your transport amounts, obviously, as well, since the carrying capacity is how the transport system works also. So if you're looking to transport huge amounts, put yourself in gathering talents and focus on those carrying capacity talents, and it will actually help you transport more resources in a shorter amount of time. And I believe that is everything covered when it comes to gathering, but also transporting in All Out War.